All right, the next card is the Temperance card. The Temperance card portrays the angel of the Lord parting the Red Sea, also known as the Sea of Reeds. This article will include a detailed description for the card's esoteric meaning and how to interpret it in a practical way. Here's an up-close picture of the Temperance card. The Temperance card illustrates the parting of the Red Sea as it's described in Exodus 14. The biblical story conveys the overall vibe and theme portrayed within this card. The book of Exodus explains how when Moses was 40 years old, he killed an Egyptian slaver and afterwards fled into the wilderness where he hid for 40 years in fear of the Pharaoh's retaliation. When Moses was 80 years old, he was approached by God, who appeared to him in the form of a burning bush on Mount Horeb. God told Moses that he would be the one to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt and free them from bondage. Moses was told to retrieve his people and bring them back to the same mountain. Although, when he returned to the mountain, it was referred to as Sinai. You see, Horeb and Sinai are both the same mountain. However, they're referenced differently depending on the energy of what is taking place there. For instance, when God tells Moses what actions to take, the mountain is referred to as Horeb. And when Moses received the new law, the mountain was referred to as Sinai. Horeb, meaning glowing heat, is considered the mountain of the sun, whereas Sinai, named after Sin, the Mesopotamian deity of the moon, is considered the mountain of the moon. The sun represents an ultimate sharing force, masculine energy, while the moon represents a receiving, feminine energy. Yahweh, through Moses, delivers the Israelites from Egypt, although Moses had to first prove himself worthy before taking on this responsibility. He had to learn how to overcome his ego, which was not easy feat for Moses. He was tested in the wilderness for 40 years before he was ready to meet with the God, who appeared to him in the form of a burning bush. The timing related to the number 40 regards how long it took for Moses to undergo his spiritual transformation. This required Moses to merge his heart with his mind, uniting them together as one, which formed a channel of communication between the two. Depicted in this card's background is the mountain of the moon that has a sun directly above it, which is a symbolic of the card's overall theme of unifying two polar opposites together as one, such as the combining of the mountain of the moon with the mountain of the sun. This is similarly described in the book of Exodus, where Moses learns how to humble himself before God. Moses eventually learned how to listen to God's voice and trust his guidance. During this experience, Moses learned how to infuse and interfuse the opposing energy polarities of the sun and the moon within himself. He was readying himself, having to undergo certain tests and challenges that molded him into the leader he never imagined himself becoming. While growing up in Egypt, Moses was a somebody. But when he fled into the wilderness, he was forced to live as a nobody for 40 years, which for him was very humbling. This was a period of his life he spent devoted to self-reflection, soul-searching, and building upon his character. When Moses returned to Egypt at the age of 80, he truly was a new man. At this point in his life, he had gained control over his emotions, he had grown spiritually intelligent, and had an unwavering sense of purpose. Moses leads the people to Sinai to meet their God, receive the law, and prepare for the journey to the promised land. There's a short conversation between God and Moses about this task, mentioned in Exodus 23:20, where God says, "Look, I'm about to send an angel before you to guard you on the way and bring you to the place that I have prepared. Be attentive to him and listen to his voice. Do not rebel against him, because he will not forgive your transgression, for my name is in him. But if you listen attentively to his voice and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes." The angel in this card has the name of Yahweh, which is YHVH, written over his heart. This is no ordinary angel. This angel has the authority to pardon sins or not, a status that belongs to God. More specifically, the reason this angel has this authority is because God says, "My name is in him." When God told Moses that his name was in this angel, he was saying that he was in this angel, his very presence, or his essence. The numbers in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verse 27, God states, "They shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I shall bless them." This angel holds within itself a spark of the divine, just as we do. And when we become pure of heart, God can then dwell within us. Our body acts as a temple for the Lord. A temple's cleanliness is temporary. Therefore, we must constantly work on ourselves and keep our bodies pure. And just how we need to maintain the cleanliness of the temple, we must also treat our homes and businesses with the same respect. As the Exodus story goes, the Israelites escaped Egypt and fled into the desert wilderness where they had to learn how to start over. They had to gradually pick up the pieces and slowly regain a sense of normalcy. As they traveled through the wilderness, they had to continue moving, all while having to break down and then later rebuild their camps over and over until they reached the promised land. However, each time they had to rebuild, they rebuilt stronger, just as Moses had to do during his time spent in exile. The Jewish people were guided by the angel of the Lord who led them through the wilderness to Mount Sinai, where they received the new law, which was required before they could enter the promised land. The Temperance card portrays this through its symbolism. For example, the angel parts the Sea of Reeds and escorts the people along the path that leads to Mount Sinai. Above this mountain is a large sun that has 45 rays surrounding it. Horeb and Sinai, sun and moon respectively, are the same mountain where Yahweh interacts with man. The number 45 is significant here because it represents Yahweh, the YHVH. This is because when you spell out each of the letter of the tetragrammaton in word form, it accumulated letters equal a value of 45 when added all together. Spelling the letters of YHVH are Yod He Vav He, and it gives the full word down there. Each letter is spelled out in word form. And then this corresponds to how the mountain is considered biblically as the mountain of God, which is synonymous with Horeb and Sinai. Moreover, the King James Bible translation says Moses crossed the Red Sea, but earlier Hebrew texts state that his people crossed the Yam Suf, meaning Sea of Reeds, being as how Yam means sea and Suf means reed. The Temperance card depicts the angel of the Lord dipping its toe in the water next to the reeds that have the yellow iris flowers. The angel of the Lord helps part the sea. Furthermore, there are exactly 42 rays that surround the angel's head that represent the 42-letter name of God. Kabbalists believe that the prayer connects to the force of creation and that anyone can use it to start over and let go of excess baggage. The 42-letter name of God is a Kabbalistic prayer known as the Anabakoa that invokes the name of God and is considered one of the most powerful prayers in the universe. It activates the chakras and the seven sephirot, connecting an individual to the Creator's light. The prayer is included in all Orthodox services and is used by Jewish traditions to add mystical power to observances. The 42-letter name is placed inside the home for protection. Archangel Raziel's amulet to ward off the evil eye. It also contains this 42-letter name. As the picture below is what you put inside homes. And it's also written on Raziel's amulet. And you read the letters from right to left, from top to bottom. The angel depicted in the Temperance card is a combination of the two archangels, Raphael and Gabriel, who are both conjoined as one. They are a perfect union of fire and water, sun and moon, male and female. Raphael represents the sun and Gabriel the moon. Kabbalistically, the sun is symbolic of a masculine energy, embodying aspects of sharing and taking action, while the moon relates to feminine energy that is more passive and has a receiving nature. This angel focuses on controlling the ebb and flow with mixing the energies of fire and water back and forth between the two vessels. The angel mixes water, like emotions, feelings, into fire, drive, ambition, and then recycles the fire back into the water. The process involves the inner manipulation of powerful spiritual energies. The sexual energy of a person is known as a life force and can be controlled through meditation, elevating their soul's vibration to eventually reaching a sense of enlightenment. The life force energy can bring both ecstasy and enlightenment. What happens is the establishment of a rhythmic motion of energy, of inner energy. The mental control of this energy, its conscious manipulation, is symbolized by the interchange of fire and water, depicted by the interchange of energies between the two bases. As one changes the rate of vibration of this inner energy, one raises their level of consciousness. The Temperance card hangs on the 25th path on the Kabbalah tree of life, which connects Tiferet with Yesod. Tiferet is ruled by the sun, and its ruling archangel is Raphael. Yesod is ruled by the moon, and its archangel is Gabriel. This is why the angel in the card adorns a sun disk on his crown and then dips his foot in the water. Water is synonymous with the moon because both relate to emotions, and thus the angel is combining the energy of the sun with the energy of the moon. It's all about controlling the inner alchemical process of mixing energies within to gain and maintain a healthy spiritual balance, and to sustain mental control over the ebb and flow of sexual and emotional energies. This requires you to consciously churn the energy back and forth to and fro as it creates a stronger vibration, empowering the chakras as it ascends in the spinal column or the kundalini, rhythmically binding, generating, and charging the life force within. The longer you hold it in, the more it builds up, and it has the potential to become more your superpower, utilizing willpower to exert mind over matter. Your sexual energy and emotions are the fuel needed to power your mind. Kabbalists teach that the story of how the Israelites escaped from Egypt is actually a metaphor for how to break free from mental bondage. The Israelites parted the sea by exerting mind over matter. In the Bible, Exodus 14, verse 15 says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on.'" This miracle did not occur until after the Israelites first stepped foot in the water. They had to believe that they had the power within themselves to do it. Afterwards, God instructs Moses to lift his staff and extend his hand over the sea to divide it, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. This card discreetly illustrates the Hermetic marriage, blending the dualities of nature. For example, the marrying of male with female, positive and negative, or fire with water. The angel depicted here is the combination of two archangels, Raphael and Gabriel, who represent male and female energy, respectively. United, they become the master alchemist who manages time with patience, thus allowing the energies within to mix and flow with each other organically in a natural manner. This sense of control over one's dualistic nature grants them power over their temper. It is essential to learn how to hold in temperamental emotions and bite our words to avoid any kind of regretful outburst. Containing oneself and controlling their emotions makes it possible for their fire to mix with their water, and thus inspiration is allotted the time it needs to communicate with the heart, which is, as a result, gives the ignited impulses the chance to simmer down as they blend and refine themselves. This angel adorns a spiritual alchemical symbol on his robe, which is the triangle that's inside the square. The triangle symbolizes fire, while the square represents the human body. Therefore, the alchemical symbol exemplifies how we should learn to control the fire within us to contain our emotions and remain grounded. The Temperance card is assigned to Sagittarius, which is a mature and refined fire sign. Sagittarius energy is positive and optimistic. They continue to move forward while looking on the bright side of things and feel as though everything will work out for them. It's as if they have a guardian angel watching over their shoulder. Ruled by Jupiter, the planet attributed to travel, is why Sagittariuses are blessed with traveling. Being symbolized by the archer alludes to how Sagittariuses are goal-oriented, and they go after things bigger than themselves, which gives them a strong sense of purpose. Consequently, the Israelites embody these Sagittarius attributes in this Exodus story that's cleverly portrayed in the Temperance card. The Hebrew letter assigned to this card is SAMEKH, meaning to prop up, uphold, support. SAMEKH is also the letter for sukkah, indicating that God's omnipresence is our support and shelter. A sukkah is the name of the hut the Jewish people lived in while in the desert wilderness. They built these huts as dwellings that would invite the presence of God within them. Therefore, the people would build their house as if it were a temple or a house of God, and they would treat their bodies as if it were a temple too, in which they would be the same with God, hence the letter SAMEKH. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 33 states, but this is the one convenient. Jeremiah 31:33 states, but this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. This is why the angel places the YHVH over its chest, which is Jehovah. The Hebrew letter SAMEKH, meaning support, relates to a dwelling or roof that supports us overhead. The idea is to make your human vessel or body a temple for God to dwell in. This card illustrates how to build up your life force in order to energize your kundalini, which is what gives you the spiritual support you need to help move you forward, and it's an empowering force that helps you overcome any and all challenges you're faced with. Uniting the sun with your moon culminates the hermetic marriage within your vessel as the heart and the brain become one and of the same. For this reason, SAMEKH exemplifies how we can draw in the light of the Creator to fill our vessel and have it dwell within us, where we become one with the Creator and the channel for the light. This connection with the light empowers our ability to utilize mind over matter. The phrase mind over matter describes the ability to use the mind to control the physical world and regulate oneself in difficult situations. The idea is that our perception can change the physical world and that our mental strength can help us manage our thoughts and emotions. In the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, it states, "When you make the two into one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the upper as the lower, and when you make the male and female into a single one, so that the male shall not be male and the female shall not be female, then you will enter the kingdom." The at-oneness, wholeness, or holiness is achieved through the practice of the spiritual alchemy. As you meditate on this card, think to yourself, God is within. I connect to the divine power in my soul and awaken an incredible source. My confidence is fortified so that I am empowered to solve my problems, to eradicate the chaos and confusion in my life. I'm aware of the good within and the good that I can do if I choose to take responsibility for the light within me. It has always been there. Now I see it. And here's a quote from Morgan Freeman. He's an American actor. And he says, "Self-control is strength. Calmness is mastery. You have to get to a point where your mood doesn't shift based on the insignificant actions of someone else. Don't allow others to control the direction of your life. Don't allow your emotions to empower your intelligence." So whenever this card is drawn, it can pertain to having to start over, slowly learning how to pick up the pieces in order to become whole again and regain some sense of normalcy. The Jewish people had to start over after fleeing from Egypt and had to begin a new life in the wilderness where they lived in tent dwellings. These tents were temporary dwellings until they reached the Promised Land. Therefore, this card can touch on having to move from one location to another. In a similar fashion, this card can signify a desire to rebuild a relationship where you will have to learn how to pick up the pieces, per se. Depending on the question and the other surrounding cards, pulling the Temperance card can allude to partners moving in together or working together under the same roof. Furthermore, this card embodies the concept of making your home a temple and how you can make it a safe haven or a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. The human body acts as a vessel that contains the light of the Creator within it. The purer we keep our body, the more light our vessel can hold. The idea is to practice temperance and respect your body as if it were a temple. Practicing temperance involves exercising self-control and moderation in order to regulate the attraction to pleasure. It can be thought of as a virtue that can be learned through patience and practice. The card's Roman numeral is 14, and coincidentally, the card corresponds to Exodus 14 that tells the story of how the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, or Sea of Reeds, as Moses frees his people from bondage. The number 14 is also significant in the Egyptian myth of Osiris. As the story goes, Osiris was cut up into 14 pieces by his jealous brother Set, who scattered Osiris's body all throughout Egypt so no one would find him. However, Osiris's soulmate, Isis, eventually recovered the lost body parts. She was upset for sure, but knew that all things are temporary, and therefore she did not lose hope. She eventually located all 14 pieces and put Osiris's body back together again. The final 14th body part was Osiris's penis, after which they made love, and Isis was impregnated with her son Horus. These three gods represent the Egyptian Holy Trinity. The concept of the Trinity is symbolized with the triangle, which represents mind, body, and spirit forged as one. All souls born on earth are one and originate from the source, but have been fragmented from one another ever since the Big Bang. We must first become one with ourselves before we can defragment the separated souls and reunite them as one. This separation we feel with one another is only temporary, and perhaps it's our tempers and our own egos that keep us apart. Defragmentation can happen sooner if we were to all connect to the light all at the same time. Just know that if you ever lose your connection to the light, that is merely temporary. You can easily reconnect by remaining mindful and choosing not to react to the chaos happening around you. If you maintain control within your vessel, the chaos will happen around you and not to you. Human beings are resilient. It's within our human nature to be able to learn how to adapt, survive, and persevere. Whenever we're forced to start over again, it's not to test our weakness, but to help us discover our strengths. And each time we do, we always build back stronger than before. As we grow stronger, we develop our character and perhaps grow a bit wiser and less naive. There are significant numbers associated with Moses' life story that correspond with this card. For example, it took 50 days to travel from Mount Horeb to Egypt, just as it took 50 days for him to travel from Egypt to Mount Sinai after freeing the Israelites from bondage. Metaphorically, this portrays Moses drawing out the energy of the sun, Mount Horeb, and merging it with the moon, Mount Sinai, conjoining them together as one, so 50% plus 50%, uniting the two halves and making them whole. Moses' name means to pull or to draw out, which relates to how he pulls one polarity and unites it with the other. Or just as how Moses pulls the Israelites out of Egypt, across the Red Sea and into the wilderness, then to Mount Sinai, and eventually to the Promised Land. Furthermore, Moses spent 40 days on the mountain when God appeared to him in the burning bush. He later returned to the same mountain to receive the new law, which required him to spend another 40 days upon the mountain. After those 40 days he had passed, Moses came down the mountain to deliver the new law to his people, who rejected it. This made Moses angry, triggering him to destroy the tablets on the ground. God then told Moses to go back up the mountain for another 40 days to make a new set of tablets. These 3 periods of 40 days on the mountain add up to a total of 120 days, which correlates with the 3 major stages of Moses' lifespan and how Moses died when he was 120 years old. Moses was 40 years old when he fled Egypt and hid in the wilderness. He later returned to Egypt at the age of 80 to free the Israelites. The final 40 years of his life, Moses spent leading his people through the wilderness and into the Promised Land. Sadly, though, Moses died at the age of 120 before entering the land of Canaan. The Hebrew letter assigned to this card, SAMEKH, has a value of 60, which is half of 120. This is interesting because the overall theme of the Temperance card is about joining 2 halves together to make them one. Just how we're able to combine the 2 polarities within our vessel to make ourselves whole, and essentially one with God. This card portrays this through the symbolism of unifying the sun and the moon, or the male and the female, or the heart and the brain. Moses' life metaphorically conveys this concept. For instance, Moses did not truly begin his life until after he turned 40. Before then, he was still growing up, growing into his own, and figuring out who he was. It took him another 40 years in the desert wilderness to discover his authentic self and evolve into adulthood. He spent the final 40 years of his life as a leader who sacrificed his own needs for the salvation of the Jewish people. Thank you.